I'm going to read from a script, by the way. We are live on LinkedIn and Facebook. Welcome, Murdoch. Is it Stephens? Am I pronouncing your last name right?
Yeah, Stephens. Yep, that's me.
Stephens. Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, welcome. So we're live now, and we're playing around with our background. Like it. Yep. Much more fun. We've got the Rat King branding back there a bit.
Yeah. It's the. I mean, it's an emoji cover. It's a cover without the title of the book on it, which plays to some of the themes in it.
Nice one.
Yeah.
So welcome, Murdoch. I've actually got. I'm quite frankly going to be reading from a script a bit here, which I'm going to do now, as I welcome you in. So going to start off with introducing you. In February, author, academic, changemaker and crowdfunder Murdoch Stephens teamed up with Renters United to run a successful crowdfund with PledgeMe that enabled him to distribute thousands of copies of his 2020 housing crisis satire Rat King Landlord around New Zealand. And you set a minimum target of $1,500 and you soared far above it and went for 10,000 or just over 10,500. So today on this live, we're going to talk with Murdoch about his inspiration to write this book and why Murdoch chose to crowdfund, some challenges he overcame, and what's next. But first of all, welcome, Murdoch. And can you, for those who are going to tune into this, let us know where you're based today?
I'm based at work. This is my lunch break. I'm based right now. I'm somewhere on Molesworth Street in central Pōneke, Wellington. Yeah.
Nice. And what's it like in Wellington today? I'm going to ask the Kiwi, the weather question.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We had big discussions about whether whether the fog was real dense fog or whether it was just a light smattering of cloud. But actually, it's nice and warm and humid. It's been real beautiful, but not sunny. And I cycle to work, so it's a big deal if it's raining or if it's too hot. You get all sweaty and gross.
Yeah, nice one. It's really cool, the biking to work thing, just having that connection outside of a building away from a computer to the environment.
Yeah. And it's like having a double shot of espresso first thing, just weaving in and out of this traffic and trying not to die.
Right.
Yeah.
The traffic thing. I thought you were referring to the endorphins, but no, you were talking about
they work together. I guess I have a bit of a death wish with it sometimes. I fly down this hill when I leave home and cross two lanes of traffic, merge through another two to get onto the cycleway. I kind of like that. It's there's a nice bit of risk there, and I think drivers sometimes are more scared of me than I am of them, which is I don't know, irresponsible, I guess.
You would feel really good though, I imagine, including the fact that you got through alive. It's a good way to start the day, isn't it? Anything physical is a great way to start the day.
Yeah, I haven't had a good crash in 6 years, so that's a good way to start.
I'm touching wood for you now.
I know, right? Arrogance is like...
So I'm going to keep a lookout for questions and comments. Anyone who's tuning in live, feel free to ask questions and comment anytime. Going to go into our first question for you, Murdoch. Can you introduce your book and explain why you were originally inspired to write it?
Yeah, I can do that. Yep. It's not my first book. So I am a writer, I guess. I've been writing novels on and off for about 15 years. So always looking for something, or it's not looking really. I don't know where the ideas necessarily come from life, from around. So the first time the book came out was 2020. I wrote it in January, February, just before COVID got us all. And I was flatting in Mount Vic in this situation where house prices were going up and landlords felt pretty comfortable putting rents up a decent amount. So we got a letter from the property management company saying our rent would go up 19%. Which is a bit of a shock, and any renters will be pretty familiar with that sense of dread when you open up the mail and get that announcement or the email. And we were thinking, well, if they're going to do that, we really need to get some of these problems around the flat fixed up. I mean, this was a bit before the healthy home standards came in, but there were things in Wellington, it's super windy, so you kind of don't want you want your windows to actually close properly and not rattle around in the wind, and maybe some of those things around heating could be fixed. And what was the big one? I mean, there was just a lot of rotting stuff So we're thinking, if rent's going up basically 20%, we'd like to talk to the landlord and ask for some of these things to be fixed. And so in the past, we'd casually mentioned these to the property management company. And we're really not sure where they got lost, whether they didn't pass them on to the landlord or whether they did and the landlord said, actually, I don't have money or I don't care, I'm not going to do that. So we started trying to find out who the landlord was for the property so we could actually have a conversation. We're all sort of writers and artists and stuff in the flat. So we thought, so that was my way of saying we're timid little souls, We're not usually keen to confront people on things, but we thought if the rent's going up this much, and we weren't people I'm a writer, we don't have that much money. It's not really the most profitable place. We thought we'd try and have a conversation with them and say, okay, can you either not put it up 19% or can you do these other things? We'd like something back from it. But we were in a pretty weak position. None of us wanted to really leave. So we couldn't actually find out who the landlord was. We had no way. Property management company didn't want to help us. So we were sitting around after about a month of this and we're going to have to sign up or get out. And we're like, I just had this thought that maybe it was the rat that had been living in our compost bin that was actually a landlord. We couldn't find the human version of it. So we thought maybe it's someone else. Maybe actually it's this like little rodent that's been defending its pile of rotting scraps. Maybe that's our landlord. We should go talk to them. So it was sort of this absurd chat we had over the kitchen table with the flatmates one night. And from there, I think it was about 6 months later, I'd still been thinking about it as you do as a writer and thought, maybe I'll write what it would look like for a rat to actually become a landlord and how they would collect rent and what they would want. So a lot of people think when they hear the title Rat King Landlord that it's saying all landlords are rats. And some people love that and some people are offended by that. But it's supposed to be entertaining to start with. It's supposed to be this, it's not supposed to be a bland polemic or an angry thing. It's supposed to be funny and interesting and entertaining. So I wrote that, put it out in July 2020. So this is kind of a long story, right? Because there's two versions of it. That was the first one, The Rat in the Compost. We got some Creative New Zealand funding from the Publishing Collective to put it out through Lawrence and Gibson. And then I was chatting to Renters United and they'd read my book and I had seen them in the media. So we had a little bromance developing. They wanted to find some way to get copies of the book to their members and I wanted to find a way to collaborate and do the same thing really cheap. So we came up with this idea of how can we make a whole bunch of cheap or free copies for their thousands of members. I think wonderful. That covers it. There's a whole bunch of other stuff in the book as well. Like it's not just angry people like shaking their finger at the property market.
Nice. And did you have fun writing the book?
I wouldn't call it fun. Like there's something that overtakes me when I write, which is a bit more spirited than fun. Maybe I laughed once or twice.
You
it's
wouldn't
good to get it out of the system. Yeah, I wouldn't call it fun.
You were compelled.
Yeah, I'd say I was compelled to put it together. Like when I write, I have these ideas and they often lurk around for a while. Like my most recent one called Down from Upland, which came out last year. It'd been in my head for over a decade. And part of it is wanting just to get it out, just to say, is this actually a book? Can I make a novel of it? And then once it's done, it's done. You don't have to think about it ever again.
Out of your system. I'm a writer. Out of interest, how many words is the Rat King Landlord?
It's been a while. I think it's probably about 60,000. So it's about 200 pages.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's pretty pacey. Like in that, there's about 50 chapters. 40 chapters. Right. So part of the thinking of it was wanted to do quick, fast chapters, changing scenes and keeping people entertained.
Nice. You could just pick it up at the end of the day and read a chapter if you need it, if you're that type of reader, which I'm not, to be honest. I just read the whole thing.
Yeah, well, we like that too.
Yeah. I better ask you another question. So we've already sort of. So my next question is, why did you decide to crowdfund? And it came out of that conversation, your bromance with Renters United.
Yeah, I think the challenge was like people were thinking of getting the book out as a question of the sales price. Like, are we going to sell enough? how can we sell it? But really, I was thinking of it in terms of distribution. How can we get it
Mm.
to people to get to other people? Like, it's fairly easy to find a way to print things sort of cheaply, but then you end up in your garage with 10,000 copies of something, and you realize that with postage costs, it adds a whole extra amount of money.
Okay. Yeah.
So we decided to crowdfund it because I knew that Renters United had a really strong connection to people who felt similar to me about the renting situation as part of the housing crisis. And that was a way to not just have us send them out one by one, but to have people who basically would join the campaign through crowdfunding. They would put some money in and they would become part of the team, basically. And so we would send out to them maybe 20 copies. Like, in the end, we had a 10 kilo option, so you could order 10 kilos. And we sold, we did, I think, 7 or 8 of those. And that was 70 something copies. Yeah, people would pay $100 to get a 10 kilo.
Selling your work by weight.
And then we're sort of looking through New Zealand Post's online system, and it's like, okay, to send 10 kilos in the North Island is $20.40 for us. But to the South Island, it was about $65. So then we had a 3 kilo option as well. Yeah, it's pretty cool selling books by weight.
Yeah. And so so you got up to just over 10,500. So what did that enable you to do?
Well, to start with, we wanted 1,500 because that was the absolute minimum. And we thought we'll use crappy paper and we'll make 2,000 copies. And that's, I'd done crowdfunding before, but that was for the Double the Refugee quota work that I'd done in 2017. And we got 12,500 then, but I just wasn't sure. And the Renters United guys weren't sure. So we wanted an absolute minimum to be the minimum. And then about halfway through, we realized we're going to have to up some of our pledges. So what it allowed us to do, like the base aspect, was to make 10,000 copies of this full color newsprint edition of Rat King Landlord. So it's about A3 in size, tabloid newspaper size, 40 pages long, full color. It allowed us to get some basic funding for 16 illustrators to draw pictures of the book, which as a writer is one of the coolest things to see. Yeah. And it also made a few responsibilities for us. Like, we promised to travel around the country to do a tour around the book. We sent a copy to every MP because it's free post parliament.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's 120 copies. We sent them to other renters organizations around the world on every continent. And we've got one lined up to go to Antarctica when that opens up after the winter. So that's sort of Rat King Landlord on every continent. Yeah, it's been real fun. We, as one of the pledges in the background, you can see the gold copy. So for the sort of the joke was, if you were a landlord, you should buy the property investor copy, which is pure gold, which is just gold cardboard on the cover, to be printed on for $99. And then the homeowner could get the silver one for $49. And those were really popular as well.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it was a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, it's the best kind of crowdfunding, when it's fun. I'm just going to interject here to say to anyone who's joined us, I'm Charlotte from PledgeMe, and I'm chatting with author of Rat King Landlord, Murdoch Stephens, about his recent crowdfunding campaign. And feel free to ask any questions. We love questions. Question number 4 for you now, Murdoch. What sort of stuff did you do to prepare for your crowdfunding campaign?
I mean, we had some basic conversations about it. I felt pretty confident because I'd done crowdfunding in the past. And so I knew that I had a group of people who would support it, I thought.
Yeah.
And then I knew that Renters United probably did. I think what it actually came down to was the design work from the former president of Renters United, Rob Whittaker, who's just a great designer. It's his day job. And so a lot of that prep was, we'd done the thinking about the minimum costs, and we priced everything out and realized what the absolute minimum was. We hadn't really thought about the maximum, but we got onto that halfway through. And then he just really made it sparkle, did images for all the pledges. It looked fantastic on the page. And I think that's what drew people in.
It was very vivid.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I'm not a designer, but I really appreciate the design skills of that. And that, it's, you kind of don't realize how good it can be until you see someone who's really good at it. to put that out.
It's such a skill set. Yeah. I know that as a wordy person who sometimes does design work for PledgeMe, how inept I occasionally feel.
Definitely Photoshop
but
and InDesign I would spend a month on if I could have any practical process to improve.
Yeah. So next question. So what happened when you launched your campaign? Did people pledge to it straight away?
Yeah. So I've done this in the past, and I realized that to succeed in it, you have to be shameless. You can't go in half-hearted.
Pro tip there.
And so I'd already gone over that sort of barricade once of just accepting that you're going to have to deafen the people closest to you. And I'm thinking in social media here. I'm thinking of the people who always.
That's a really cool way to put it.
Yeah.
That you need to be shameless. Just get over that. Yeah.
Well, and that's because you've got to believe in the project enough to do that. But I've got plenty of friends who have just sneaked over the line to get a campaign done because they felt a little too much shame about basically begging for people to.
Totally. And it's a very feeling for people. Asking for money, even though in PledgeMe's case it's an exchange, so there's a spirit of reciprocity, but it still is. It's maybe a New Zealand culture thing. I don't know. It's still scary for a lot of people to ask for money. Yeah.
And it's a repetition of it. Everyone's good at doing one Twitter post or one Facebook post or something on LinkedIn or Instagram, but it's having to do that like maybe multiple times a day, having to scrounge up some content and feeling like, okay, those people closest to you who see all your stuff is going to see it too much. And you can be a little apologetic once or twice about that. Or you can go in celebrating all the steps you get and have it more of a that kind of thing where instead of saying sorry, you thank people.
Oh, that's the best way to go. Yeah.
And that meant that aim of getting $1,500, I think we surpassed that in like 11 hours. And that was just from the social media to start with. People were really into it, and that made it a lot easier to continue. Whenever Renters United talk about it, they say, and we put it live and we didn't really know that it had happened because they hadn't checked their email. I'm like, it's live, it's 8 a.m., it's gone. And as soon as they looked at it, we'd actually passed the 1,500. And they're like, it just happened organically. I was like, well, I did those tweets in that Facebook, and there was all the retweets when that other guy did it. And, but yeah, it was some of that shamelessness to start with, and then celebrating the marks that we got to.
Nice.
So it was great.
That's really good advice, I think, for people, thinking about crowdfunding, because it's a common thing that people grapple with.
The shame of it all.
I think so, actually. So you were really lucky in that you reached your minimum target quite quickly, which was so cool, and it's so good for your confidence when that happens. So then a lot of people that we see with with crowdfunding can sort of start strong, but then things will slow down mid-campaign. How were things for you mid-campaign?
So we had made a bit of a mistake in that, like, we wanted to. We did a campaign that only lasted 10 days, which isn't necessarily a mistake, but
unusually short. Yeah.
And that's because Rob was like, there's always a lull in the middle. There's always the 20, you do a month and the 20 days in the middle are always quiet. So we knew there would be that lull. So we thought we'll do a 10-day one so that there's a 3-day lull rather than a 2-week lull. But at that point, since we'd already crossed the mark, we had to think of new stretch goals and have a meeting. And this is where I think we're at about $2,500 and said, okay, how about if we get $10,000, we'll print 10,000. And as a writer, that's like, yes, please, I want 10,000 of these out there. But none of us really thought we'd get that. And so we kind of agreed to all those stretch goals that we did. We had a goal, a thing we would do for each 1,000 extra we got.
Nice.
And that allowed us to keep pushing at different marks of saying, if we do this, we'll do that. If we get that, we'll do this. And still the original pledges were there. I mean, maybe one of the challenges with that 10 days was there have been like more than a handful of who came up afterward and said, is that closed already? What happened? I saw that once, but I didn't get around to paying for it then because I was really busy. So it did make me think maybe if we'd had 3 weeks, that would have scooped up a few more. And then again, the more money we got, the more things we had to do. And I've already got a fairly busy life. So this wasn't really
Right.
factored into my calendar to be the like number 1 or 2 thing I was doing this year.
Yeah, those rewards take time at the end, don't they?
Yeah. And particularly because I'll get into it a bit later, but we pledged some things like doing a tour around the country.
Yeah.
And that's really good for Renters United and for us to get these out there, but it is a lot of work. Like if we had only got 2,000 copies, we probably would have gone through them already, and we might have had a Wellington and Auckland event, and probably would have had to pay a bit more ourselves. Yeah.
So you've sort of answered this question already, but what were the hardest parts of this crowdfund for you, and how did you work through those challenges?
I mean, I think it is still that hump of shame around beginning to ask and having that little sense that your friends and family, and sometimes even people who are close to you but who don't have that much money, you're constantly asking them for help. I can't remember the last time before this that, like in our publishing collective, we just put some pre-sales up, and we've had really good pre-sales of a book, which was really good. But it sort of feels like maybe, like personally, I feel like I could probably only go out for a project like this every couple of years. The last one we did.
You don't want to ask too much from your friends and family. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And you've got to have a really good reason. I think the one before this was a new printer for the anarchist printing space that we work at. And I think we raised $6,000, but I wasn't the main one leading that. I think 2.5 years ago. So it was sort of that. There really is a moment where you sometimes, to be honest, I just have a whiskey before I send out that email to the 300 people on my list, and just like, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to click send. I'm going to have a whiskey. I'm going to click send. I'm going to write the damn thing, click send, and then I'm going to shut my laptop and go to bed.
I think it's so good for people watching this and to know that about this process you go through. So it puts this is a really scary part for some people. That is the reason some people hardly even begin their campaigns. This what you're talking about. So I'm wanting to ask you now, what part of crowdfunding did you most enjoy?
Well, I mean, in the same sense, I kind of like the shamelessness of it, to go over that, just that once you've got yourself into it, you're going all in. And once you can actually go all in and you've got to that point where you say, this project is worth it, I'm backing this project, and I'm going to ask everyone. But so
you just get into that headspace.
Yeah, and that I'm sort of joking here, right? Like it's the hardest, but it's also the funnest. And maybe it's a slightly masochistic thing to be like, I like to just sort of push through and revel in the shame. But I think actually the best part of it was, this particular one, was teaming up with Renters United, because of how committed and well respected they are in the area, and that they actually get the things done that they say they're going to do.
Wow.
So they brought a whole new energy to it of, we'd have a meeting. There would be a list of things to do afterwards. Next meeting, that'd all be done.
Wow.
Particularly, like, they brought in their crowd. It's kind of like those Whitaker's Chocolate collaborations, I've got the publishing crowd and that arts crowd. They've got the renters crowd, and it was just a perfect mash together.
Nice.
People wanted to help them. People liked the book, and I mean, the book had done pretty well already, so it already had a crowd of people who were enthusiastic on it. And then, on top of that, I think Rob's connections to the arts community and seeing some of the illustrations come through, because we were a little pushed for time. We didn't have all the illustrations ready. They were just dribbling in as the campaign was going. And so also the artists were excited. And that's like an extra 16 people who are going to share it in their social media and around. And some people with really big followings. So I think that could have been some of the success as well. A few other people, it wasn't just my project, it wasn't just us in Renters United. It was all these artists whose work was going to be produced and shared for a cause they cared about.
Amazing. Yeah. We brought a whole new level of magic bringing in those artists.
Yeah. And I didn't really think of that to start with. I knew the Renters United side, but this is Rob's genius.
And my next question was going to be, if you were to do it again, what would you do differently? And you did sort of touch upon maybe you would have done a slightly longer campaign, still quite short at 3 weeks.
Yeah,
Anything
and
else?
it's probably a weird time of the year. We just, time-wise, we got squeezed, right? Yeah, February was, at least in my life, it's a busy time. All weekends are taken up with some festival or a party or or people moving around the country. It doesn't feel like a settled time.
Right.
So, there's an ideal. So maybe we would have done it for 3 weeks, a little bit later, and we would have had that time between when it ends and when we get the funds sorted out. Like, it was really touch and go to get, like, we had to pay the printers before they printed, obviously. Although they're still invoicing us now to pay them, which is funny because we paid them ahead of time. And then they're like, hey, you have to pay us for it's like, you wouldn't have printed it if, anyway. So there is always that sort of, you've got to factor in on the other side, You don't just get the money immediately. You have to, there's a process where that money comes in from the pledges. And the vast majority of it did come in fairly quickly, but there's a little bit you have to wait for. And then there's some clearing time. So it's always time, right? But actually sometimes time makes you do things that you might be a bit slow on otherwise. And so squeezing it in was hectic. It's still pretty fun.
That's something I see coming up a lot with people about that they don't expect how much time it's going to take after the campaign to tie the loose ends up. Like, it can take months. And then it can be good to communicate with the crowd writer. Well, just communication can be important. Just to let people know what things.
That's communication has been, I've pledged on things in the past that have come to me a year and a half later. I'm like, I completely forgot about that. Cool. I'm glad I wasn't desperate to see that. Even at the moment with pre-sales from the novels we're doing, the novels are out in 6 weeks. And I was just looking at our website. These are 2 different authors who are members of our collective. I was like, we didn't highlight enough that this is a pre-sale and that the books aren't ready yet, because the covers are there and people might think they're going to get the books this week or next. So there's just that communication being really clear up front, so you don't have to do twice as much work down the line responding to emails.
We certainly see that PledgeMe as well, in terms of managing expectations about when rewards will arrive and that kind of thing, and postage and all the logistics, how that's all going to happen. Okay, so I'm wondering, for those out there who are thinking about crowdfunding, maybe doing a similar project to you, my question is, what are your top 2 pieces of advice? But, is there any advice that comes to mind that you would say to people after this most recent crowdfund?
I think the thing, if I have a thing I have to do on my plate, I just really do it. So I just finish it. I hate things hanging over me. And so I am always really keen to get those pledges out to people as soon as possible. So, for example, on this one, when I could see the numbers of golds and silver copies of the book that were being pledged for, I went and got the paper ahead of time and estimated how many we'd need so we could print those special covers off and get those done. And part of that is when you're a writer, like, I know I've seen quite a few ones where people are seeking money to write a book, and the thing that people are going to get out of that is the book itself. And I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend raising money for something and making the pledges something you can do straight away, so it doesn't hang over you and doesn't stress you about not being able to. Just when people ask about it, and people probably aren't being mean, they probably just want to have a chat about how your book is going. So if you're funding to write a book, maybe sort the pledges out as something you already have the capacity to do.
Right.
Particularly
so
straight afterwards. Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I feel that debt to people if I owe them something.
Yeah.
And it stresses me out a bit. And also, I sort of think about these things as the crowdfunding is as much about building up a crowd as it is getting funds for the project. And the use of that crowd, like for the Rat King Landlord one, that's 289 people who have indicated and given us their emails that they really support this so much or support us as individuals, that they want this thing to happen. And you want to make sure that crowd stays on side with you. You want to make sure that they feel listened to and aren't just ignored, aren't just used for their money.
And how
sort
do
of
you do
earlier
that?
on, sorry, how did we do that?
Yeah.
It was, like you were saying before, communication. It was like when we sent out all the pledges, and I think 250 of them required us to send something out.
Right.
Also, another tip, you can find cheap postage on TradeMe. Yeah, like there's various little things going on where people have bought too many prepaid envelopes, or there are other ways to save on postage. Yeah, I think there's some guy in Christchurch at the moment selling these envelopes with $4.30 stamp. So that's like an envelope like that size, like an A4 one, for $3.40 including postage. But it's got $4.30 of postage. I don't know where the guy got them from. I'm not asking, but it did save us a couple of $100 going through him.
Oh, wow. You shopped around a lot.
Yeah. And then it's also like when we sent out the pledges, we we thanked people and we talked to them about the tour that was coming up. We hadn't fixed the dates completely, but we said, hey, watch out. We're going to do tours in these places. We'd love to see you there. And also just like going back to them. So the second thing I would say is like I lost this for a little bit at the start, but realizing that our goal was to raise this money to be able to give copies away for free or really cheap if it's sold in a bookstore or another retail space. And the only way we could do the second one was because of the first one. So thanking the people and saying like, oh, hey, you pledged $100. That produced, 130 copies of this that we can give away to other people. So being really clear that they made that possible. And
cool.
Even being able to quantify it, because some people bought one copy for $20. They supported our PledgeMe to make it happen. You could get one copy, it cost $20. And I didn't want those people feeling like they'd been ripped off, that they paid $20 and other people could get it free or for just $2.
Right.
So I really wanted them to realize and to be told repeatedly that if it wasn't for them, no one else would have got those. If it wasn't for them, 26, 27 people wouldn't have got those copies. So making them just realize that they're our champions in that. And that's sort of that thing of building the crowd, right? There's 289 people who have not only aware of it, but say this is something we want to be in the world. And if they feel good about it, then we can get rid of 10,000 copies.
Amazing. Yeah. And what a great point to make. As a pledger, we want to feel that we have made a difference. It's such that's why we pledge. So,
and it's hard, right? If you're dealing with hundreds of people, and some people often might slip through the cracks. We had the postal system kind of ruined in February because of the storms. Right? It took 2 weeks for something to get to Waiheke at one point. And so someone was like, hey, where's that thing? We're starting to see other people have unpackaged theirs, and we're seeing that it's in Unity Books for $2. Why haven't I received mine yet? So a lot of that thinking of how to not get people offside. I feel the same way about the illustrators, to be honest. Like they put in their time and effort, and they saw $10,000 come into the campaign. So just being clear with them that where that money's going.
Taking care of your crowd.
Yeah.
Ensuring that
each of them of it did go to printing. So printing.
Right. Yeah.
We probably should have done 8,000 to be honest, but 10,000 for $10,000 sounds good.
Yeah, it does sound good. Yeah. We are wrapping up with one final question. Where are you at now with your book and your mission? What's happening for you now?
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Well, so we did 10,000 copies. We've got some really cool pictures of us with this forklift loading them into a rent-by-the-hour van. Those were stored in garages, and garages in Wellington get pretty wet in winter and moldy, just like flats. So we really wanted to get through them as soon as we could to make sure we didn't have some massive waste. So we're down to under 4,000 copies remaining, which feels good. We've got the nationwide tour going on at the moment. So last weekend we were at Palmerston North. This Friday we'll be on the University of Otago's campus giving away copies from noon to 2 p.m.
Oh,
and then
fun.
doing an event that night at yours on Moray Place. We'll also be doing some stuff with a local renters' rights group there. So I'll be there, and Renters United will be there. Next day, we drive up to Ototahi, Christchurch, and we'll do a launch from 3 to 5 p.m. before getting the 2 a.m. ferry back the same night.
What a day.
Yeah. Hey, and I'm not 21 anymore, right? Like, it's not easy to blast through, but we'll do it. And then 2 weeks later, we've got the Tamaki Nakoto, Auckland, and Kirikiriroa, Hamilton launches. Yeah, and I'm still pretty much of the same mind. And I think it was right at the start to think distribution is the problem. Making 10,000 copies is expensive. It's like $7,500 to do this full color tabloid copy. But really, if you had to send every single one of them out by mail, that's another $4.30 or $3.40 if you get the cheap postage. So distribution's still the question. How do we get it to the right people? How do we get to people who don't know about it? And that's where my thinking sat. How do we get to the people who might support Renters United and be a part of it? Because that's sort of the mission, right? Like, there's always the ego trip as the writer to say, for me, it's about getting people reading my work, which is cool and is true. And it's a beautiful publication. But I teamed up with Renters United because I think they're really good at what they do. So the mission to me is about them getting more people connected, understanding them, and wanting to support them as an organization. We also still have had some good connections to retailers and bookstores where they can buy 3 or 10 kilos, and they're still ticking along on our website. Like, if people listening to this want 3 kilos, it's $15. We can send it out. It'll be 22 copies that you get. Or stores like yours in Dunedin or the Women's Bookshop in Auckland bought 10 kilos each, and so they have them there. So you can get them through. We're actually on the bestseller list for quite a while at Unity Books in Wellington, as well as nationwide, because we put a barcode on it. It's registered. They're selling it for $2, so we cheekily snuck onto their lists. So yeah, it feels really good, to be honest. Like, when people ask me how it's going, there's nothing bad about it. It's been like a dream run. It's been beautiful.
Amazing. Well, congratulations. It was so fun for us, and at PledgeMe HQ, which is really all around the country. We were blown away by your campaign and how fast you reached your minimum target, and watching you weave your magic. Yeah,
thank you. It's great to have your support. You know, I like the model of PledgeMe. I like the giving back. You know, I've done things in the past where it's you just ask money for people, but I really love that aspect of PledgeMe. It allows you to get things out, allows you to distribute and use that crowd in a different way.
Brilliant.
So thank you for everything you do.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your time today, and your giving us your lunch break.
Well, you gave us so much, so lunch break is very little. I should have some lunch though, eh?
Yeah, you should eat. Yeah, all that biking. Got to keep yourself well fueled. People are welcome to comment and ask questions. This will be around on YouTube, but we'll just keep this up online for a while. And I'll reach out to you if we have any questions we can't answer, Murdoch. But
nice.
Thanks, everyone. We're going to say goodbye, and thank you so much again, Murdoch, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thanks. Ka kite.
Ka kite. Bye.